fog over the river valley was not merely a weather phenomenon. It was as if a living creature, on that April morning, had decided to conceal the impending horror from human eyes. The damp, biting cold seeped under greatcoats, making sentries on both banks shiver not so much from the low temperature as from an oppressive premonition. It was the spring of 1918, a moment when the history of Europe hung in a fragile balance, ready to collapse like an avalanche. The Lys River, usually a calm and unremarkable artery of Flanders, had transformed into a border between hope and catastrophe, a frontier separating the British Expeditionary Force from the loss of strategic channel ports. In the air hung a heavy, sweetish smell, unmistakable, the aroma of mustard gas mixed with the scent of damp earth and decay, which had become the perfume of the Great War. To an outside observer, not immersed in staff maps, the river might have seemed an insignificant obstacle, but for strategists in Berlin, London, and Paris, this waterway became the axis around which the fate of millions revolved. There was no room for chance here. Every bend in the channel, every bridge, every embankment had been studied, measured, and incorporated into artillery fire plans. The silence hanging over the water was deceptive, a string stretched to its breaking point, ready to snap at the first shot. Headquarters understood. Whoever controlled the crossings controlled the initiative. And whoever held the initiative in this exhausting war of attrition gained a chance to impose their will on the enemy. But behind the dry lines on the maps lay the living, breathing reality of thousands of people, their hearts beating in unison with the current of the dark water, awaiting an order that would forever change their destinies. This confrontation had been brewing for months, stemming from the logic of the global stalemate into which the conflict had descended. The German Empire, having gathered its last forces into a single fist after the closure of the Eastern Front, sought a way to break through the Allies' steel wall before fresh forces arrived from overseas. The plan was audacious, relying on speed and surprise, on the use of new stormtrooper tactics capable of infiltrating defenses like water through fingers. However, the Allies, exhausted by years of continuous fighting, perfectly understood the price of every inch of land. For them, the Lys River became not just a geographical feature, but a symbol of resilience, the last bastion beyond which lay the terrifying void of defeat. The question was not about seizing territories, but about the survival of nations, about the ability of industrial machines to break the back of human endurance. When the artillery barrage began, it was not like thunderclaps. It was a continuous, uninterrupted hum that made the very ground vibrate, turning solid earth into a shifting quagmire. The sky was split by flashes, and thousands of shells rained down on the forward positions, grinding up wire entanglements, trenches, and dugouts. This fiery wall was intended not merely to destroy physical obstacles, but to break the will of the defenders, to drive them into the ground, to deprive them of the ability to think and resist. Particularly terrifying was the use of chemical shells, which silently settled into low-lying areas, filling the trenches with a deadly fog that neither deep shelters nor prayers could ward off. The chaos of the first hours of the offensive was absolute. Communication was severed, orders were lost in the roar of explosions, and each soldier found himself alone with his fate in this hell. The outer layer of this conflict was a clash of colossal material resources. On one side, the German war machine, which relied on the quality training of its assault battalions and the concentration of artillery. Their tactic was not to assault fortified strongholds head-on, but to bypass them, leaving them in the rear, disrupting communications and sowing panic. On the other side, British and Portuguese units, whose defense was built on a system of echeloned trenches and machine gun nests, designed to hold positions at all costs. The visible part of the battle was the struggle for bridges, for crossings, which engineers on both sides alternately tried to build and destroy. Explosions sent fountains of water and mud into the air, mixing structures of steel and wood with the bodies of those who tried to defend or capture them. But beneath the roar of the cannonade lay a second, deeper layer of conflict, internal, psychological. This was a battle not only of armies but of characters, a clash of the human spirit with inhuman circumstances. Commanders on the ground, cut off from higher command, had to make decisions in seconds that determined the lives of thousands of people. What is it like to give the order to blow up a bridge, knowing that your comrades are on the other side, now doomed to captivity or death? This moral dilemma tore at the souls of officers more fiercely than shrapnel. In the dugouts, by the light of kerosene lamps, dramas worthy of ancient tragedies unfolded. Fear battled duty. The instinct of self-preservation battled the oath. Simple soldiers, stunned and disoriented, found the strength to hold their rifles when all instincts screamed to flee. It was here, in the mud and blood, that the true essence of heroism was forged, not in grand gestures, but in the ability to continue doing one's job when the world around was collapsing. Even deeper lay the third ideological layer of confrontation. The Battle of Lys became the culmination of the dispute between two military philosophies, two views on the future of war. The German concept of maneuver warfare, based on the initiative of junior commanders and tactical flexibility, clashed with the rigid but resilient Allied defense system, relying on industrial and logistical power. It was a conflict between audacity and calculation, between reliance on the human factor and faith in the superiority of technology. The paradox was that, despite tactical successes and breakthroughs, the German strategy began to falter precisely because of its dependence on speed. Having detached from their rear, assault groups lost their striking power, encountering the fact that their victories at the tactical level did not translate into a strategic triumph. The Allies, despite the initial shock and loss of territory, showed an astonishing ability to recover, proving that in modern warfare, the strength of the system is more important than the brilliance of a single maneuver. The key moment, the bifurcation point, was the battle for strategic crossings and railway hubs, such as Hazebrouck. It was here, when it seemed that the front had finally collapsed and the road to the coast was open, that something happened that could not be predicted by mathematical models. It was a transformation of the perception of the situation. From the chaos of retreat, fierce resistance began to crystallize. The famous order of the British Field Marshal, stating that there was nowhere to retreat and one must stand with one's back to the wall, became not just words, but a catalyst that changed the psychology of the troops. Soldiers, who yesterday were ready to abandon their positions, suddenly acquired the cold determination of the doomed. Engineer units, usually in the shadows, came to the forefront. Their work in blowing up bridges and creating temporary fortifications under heavy fire became the factor that slowed the German advance just enough for reserves to arrive. Time, gained at the cost of incredible effort, became the most valuable resource, more precious than gold and shells. The situation changed with kaleidoscopic speed. German units, exhausted by days of advance, faced the problem of stretched communications. Supplies could not keep up with the advanced detachments, and elite stormtroopers, finding themselves without artillery support and fresh ammunition, began to lose the initiative. At this moment, French cavalry and infantry, transported by trucks, a harbinger of future mechanized warfare, entered the scene. the sudden appearance of fresh forces in a sector that the German command considered practically cleared a shock. Paradoxically, the success of the German breakthrough became the cause of their crisis. They advanced so far that they fell into a pocket, subjected to flanking attacks. The logic of war showed its ironic side. Victory in space turned into defeat in time. The culmination of the battle did not come at a single moment, but stretched over several days of fierce fighting for every house, every farm, and of course, for the crossings. The bridges over the Lys, some of which were destroyed and others hastily restored, became the epicenters of a hellish maelstrom. All branches of service were mixed here. Infantry went into bayonet charges, artillery fired point blank, and airplanes circled in the sky, showering the ground with lead. This was the boiling point, where it was decided whose will would prove stronger. German attacks rolled in waves, but each subsequent one was weaker than the last. Defensive structures, hastily created by British and French engineers, turned out to be unexpectedly effective traps. Machine gun nests, camouflaged in ruins, created zones of continuous destruction, turning open spaces into valleys of demise. Ultimately, the offensive faltered, not due to a lack of courage from the attackers, but due to the exhaustion of the human body's physical capabilities and the material base. When the smoke of battle began to clear, a picture full of tragic grandeur and important lessons emerged. The fields of Flanders, plowed by explosions, became a giant graveyard of illusions about a quick victory. The resonance of these events extended far beyond the spring of 1918. Analysts from various countries, including observers from Russia and Poland, carefully studied the course of the operation, trying to understand the reasons for success and failure. For Polish strategists, who would soon have to defend their independence, the experience of the Battle of the Lys became a visual aid on the importance of maneuver and the danger of linear defense. They saw that even the most powerful fortifications could be breached if the enemy used new infiltration tactics, but also understood that without a reliable rear and logistics, any breakthrough was doomed. Russian military theorists, analyzing this experience through the prism of their revolutionary upheavals, also drew conclusions about the role of morale and the class structure of the army, although their interpretations were colored by ideology. The main lesson taught by the battle was a re-evaluation of the role of engineering support. It became obvious that a shovel and a pickaxe in modern warfare are no less important than a rifle. The ability to quickly erect obstacles, build crossings, and restore what was destroyed became a crucial factor in strategic stability. Germany demonstrated to the world the effectiveness of assault groups, but France and England proved the superiority of coordinated defense and the strategic mobility of reserves. This was a clash of ingenious tactics with strategic power, and power won, though at a terrible price. The significance of these engineering works was noted by all sides. German reports were full of complaints about the impossibility of overcoming quickly erected barriers, and the Allies praised their sapper battalions as saviors of the front. Today, looking back at those events, we see in them not only a military chronicle, but also a mirror of human nature. The Battle of the Lys reminds us how thin the line is between triumph and catastrophe, and how often the fate of nations depends on the resilience of ordinary people performing their duty in unbearable conditions. These lessons are relevant even now. Technologies change, drones and cyber weapons appear, but the essence of conflict remains the same. It is a struggle of will, logistics, and the ability to adapt to changing conditions faster than the enemy. History teaches us that there are no impregnable fortresses, only defenders ready to stand to the end, and that any aggression, even the most meticulously planned, sooner or later shatters against the rocks of human spirit and solidarity. Returning in our mind's eye to the Lys River, we again see the fog. But now it does not conceal terror, but envelops memory. The water, flowing calmly under the restored bridges, holds the secrets of those days when it was red with blood. The circle has closed. The silence with which everything began has returned, but now it is the silence of appeasement and sorrow. Those who stood there, on the banks, peering into the gloom, left us a message, written not with ink, but with their lives. This message is that even in the darkest hour, when it seems that hope is lost and the enemy is relentless, human perseverance is capable of performing a miracle, stopping the inevitable. The river continues to flow, carrying names and dates into eternity, but leaving us the essence of what happened, an eternal reminder of the fragility of peace and the incredible strength of those who undertake to protect it. The legacy of those events is traced not only in monuments and memorials, but also in the very philosophy of military art. The experience gained at the cost of enormous losses formed the basis of new doctrines. Germany, analyzing its mistakes, perfected breakthrough tactics 2 decades later, creating the Blitzkrieg, while the Allies, unfortunately, relied too heavily on the experience of positional defense, which played a cruel trick on them in the future. However, it was there, on the banks of the Lys, that the interconnectedness between engineering art and combat success, between the rear and the front, first became so vividly apparent. The understanding that war is not just shooting, but a complex mechanism for managing resources, space, and time finally established itself in the minds of military theorists worldwide. Poland and Russia, observing this Western experience, saw it as a warning. For the Polish army, which would soon face the Red Cavalry, the lessons of the Lys emphasized the necessity of flexibility. They understood that a river could be both a shield and a trap, and that a bridge was not merely an engineering structure, but a key to the heart of a country. Russian analysts, in turn, saw confirmation that old methods of warfare were dying with empires, and that the future lay with new forms of organization and mobilization. Thus, the echo of the battle on the distant Flemish River resonated in the minds of people thousands of kilometers away, influencing decisions that would be made in Warsaw and Moscow in the turbulent years of the 20th century that followed. Looking into the details of those days, one is struck by how much, seemingly, trifles meant. An untimely pontoon bridge, a jammed machine gun bolt, a single sergeant's decision to hold a position for 5 more minutes. All these microscopic events formed a giant mosaic of history. This reminds us that history is not made by abstract forces. It is created by specific people at specific moments in time. Every soldier on the banks of the Lys was a creator of history, though he probably didn't realize it himself. Their fear, their pain, their hope, and their determination became the mortar that cemented the foundation of the future Allied victory. And now, as we walk through these places where the earth once burned underfoot, we must remember not only strategy and tactics. We must feel that connection of times that stretched from the trenches of 18 to our present day. For the questions that war posed to people then, about duty, about honor, about the price of life and freedom, remain unchanged. Technical progress has changed the scenery, but the drama of human existence has remained the same. The Battle of Lys is not just a page in a textbook. It is a living lesson of courage and tragedy that we are obligated to learn to understand who we are and where we come from. The philosophical aspect of this clash continues to stir minds. For, in essence, on the banks of the Lys, It was not just armies that clashed, but two kinds of despair. The German despair of the attacker, understanding that this was the last chance, and the British despair of the defender, knowing that there was nowhere to retreat. And in this clash of two ultimate tensions, the truth was born that defense, based on moral righteousness and the protection of one's home, often proves stronger than aggression, even if the latter is better organized technically. The engineering structures, which played such an important role, were merely an extension of people's will, the material embodiment of their desire not to let the enemy pass. Concrete and steel can be destroyed, but the will to resist, if it is real, is not eroded by shells. Concluding this mental journey along the riverbed, it is worth looking at the water one more time. It still flows to the sea, indifferent to human passions, but now we know that every liter of it is paid for with someone's blood. The history of the Battle of Lissa teaches us to value a peaceful sky and those bridges that connect people, rather than serving as targets for artillery. Let this lesson, etched in the memory of generations, become a warning and a reminder that true strength lies not in destruction, but in creation and the ability to protect what is dear. And when the fog again descends on the valley, let it be only a harbinger of a calm morning, and not a veil before a storm. And let the bridges on Lissa always remain symbols of connecting shores and not lines of defense.